My name is Chris. I'm a gold miner here in Victoria, Australia, and my job is super simple. It's to teach people just like yourself how to find gold anywhere across the world. Because even though I live in upside down land here in Australia, gold follows exactly the same rules no matter where you are. One of the best ways I've found to teach people how to find gold, besides making little mini tutorials, is quite simply to do an uncut and unedited video. I walk you around a spot and show you what I'm looking at so you get a better understanding, and that's what we're going to be doing today. Everything you see here before you is an alluvial gold mine. They used hydraulic water cannons to blast the banks away and funnel all that soil through sluice boxes that were set up in the creek. In fact, this isn't even the original creek. The history reports tell me that this is a water race that dates back to the turn of the 19th century. And I'm working in this particular spot at the moment simply because there is bedrock. Now, most gold prospectors love bedrock. Bedrock is impervious to gold. In other words, gold can come all the way down and settle on the bedrock, like if this was a big chunk of gold, and it can't go through it. And the reason that is so important is because gold, not that this is gold, this is quite clearly a rock. All that means is this lovely H2O stuff that we enjoy weighs about 1 gram per cubic centimeter, whereas a piece of gold, we'll use this rock as a stand-in, weighs about 19 grams per cubic centimeter. And therefore, even a really tiny, small piece of gold has enough density to force its way to the very bottom of the creek through most other things, including hard packed layers, sediments, silts, and about the only thing that will stop it is a dense clay or a bedrock. But here's the thing, all prospectors know that, and what happens is people come along to these spots and they come up and look where gold would normally fall out, which is usually in the crevices. Crevices like this offer gold an opportunity to slow down in the velocity of a flood. You got to remember that this creek right now is just at the end of high summer, and that means that all of the water here is moving very slowly. Normally, a flood layer would be all the way up there. We would have water right up here. That's a lot of velocity and a lot of energy. So the gold needs something to drop out on. Being so dense, it tends to drop out at the first opportunity, hence crevices. Because we know that bedrock stops gold, prospectors hit it. They will come along and scratch out all these crevices, they break up the bedrock. In fact, you can even see shattered bits of bedrock left here by other prospectors. These piles of rock are not natural, they've been placed there by someone. Now, because bedrock is such an obvious place to check for gold, everyone does it. And that means there's very few bedrock sections left on any popular creeks that hold any kind of significant gold. But if you spend your time just sitting and looking, you're going to start spotting some things that other people will miss. For me, it was this log. This log clearly has not moved in an extraordinarily long time. First of all, the top of it is extremely water worn. All of this is broken up by the rocks and the river pounding it every time a flood comes over. But the other thing that's super interesting is that the lower you get on the log, the less worn it is. That means that this has been protected by the sediment and dirt. This hasn't moved in a long time. Wood is not dense. Wood is far from dense. I mean, we build boats out of it, for Christ's sake. So even a log like that would have a hard time stopping in a flood. I asked the question, why did it stop there? And the answer was this bedrock. Even though this bedrock runs parallel with the creek, you can see here that we've got the direction of flow, and this is a bedrock edge here. The bedrock runs this way with the flow water. It actually hooks around underneath this gravel, and I figured that out by getting my shovel in there and whacking the stream bed. So if we come along here, you can hear solid. Solid, 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 solid. And we come to the gravel. It's still solid, it's not sinking in. So that means that this bedrock hooks around like that. That curvature goes out into the center of the creek. There's every chance that that is what caused this log to drop out. It's heavy enough to sink to the bottom of the water, probably not to penetrate through the gravels. But when you get a drop off like that with a bedrock shelf, it offers the perfect opportunity for it to do that. And therefore, even though everyone's picked over this area and there is a little bit of gold there, no one has touched underneath or near that log where there is a bedrock drop off just barely hiding under the gravels. So I'm going to put you down and we're going to grab a pan of material from behind that log. That right there is what we're talking about. This clay isn't actually clay. It's not a sediment that's fallen out of suspension as the rivers washed over the bedrock and then it's formed a layer. This is actually decaying bedrock. The bedrock in this area is super porous and super soft. The longer you have gravel like this running over the top of this bedrock, it turns it into this super dense sticky clay. That's where our gold's going to settle out. A common problem for beginners is not knowing that all clays don't need to be worked. This is the side that was in contact with the stream bed itself. That means the float rock, all these rocks that were traveling downstream during flood, has been grinding over the top of the bedrock. These are the rocks that got stuck in the clay in the bedrock when it was doing that process. On the other side is actually smooth clay, even though there's rock on it from my pan when I dumped it in there, but it contains no gravel. If it contains no gravel, it's probably not going to contain gold. You need the bed load in the clay to get gold. And therefore, I generally suggest to all beginners and newcomers to only work where the gravel has permeated into the clay and maybe a centimetre or so underneath that, just in case there's something bigger that's worked its way down. In all of my testing and over a decade of prospecting, I've never found any significant gold in clay that holds no gravel. Now, I already know that there is gold in that spot. It's a bit sporadic. If I can get hard up across that bedrock shelf that's going across the creek, I tend to get really good pans with occasionally a little chunky piece of gold coming out in it. If I don't get that, I'll get maybe a couple of nice pieces and a bunch of flour gold. All of the gold is hugging that bedrock shelf, and the only reason it's still there is because it was hidden underneath that log and gravel. And that's what we're talking about. There's the obvious stuff that everyone goes for, all the bedrock shelves, all the crevices that are really clear and easy to see. But if you spend that little bit of extra time not only observing the surrounding area to make sure that you're not missing something obvious like this, but also the time to open it up. Sometimes you'll have to remove 1 or 2 feet of overburden, if not more, where there's very little to no gold. And other times, like now, you'll be able to dig straight down and get straight onto it. This is also a really good sign. This is old glass. This is historic glass. This would have been from the villages and townships that were upstream, bottles getting dumped into the creek. Glass has a similar density to quartz, but also to gemstones. And your gemstones tend to settle on top of black sand. Black sand being a heavier mineral in most waterways, usually about half to a third the weight of gold or density of gold. If you're finding a lot of black sand or glass, you're probably in the right area for gold to be hanging around if it's there. Now I'm just spending a bit of time breaking up that clay that was in contact with the bed load. I'm not too pedantic about it. I just want to make sure that all the rocks that were sitting on top of that clay have been broken off, which they have been now. Gold is so dense you can be quite aggressive with your panning too. You can literally just scrape most of it off the top, no worries at all. There's a common misconception about panning as well, which is that the riffles are there to stop your gold falling out when you wash off over the top. And what I mean by that is, people think they're safety riffles, that if they pan too hard and they accidentally wash some gold from the back of their pan out the front, the riffles will stop it, but that's not what it's there for. The riffles are there to secure the dirt to the bed of the pan so you don't lose gold from underneath. Because if you don't have these riffles, the whole clump of dirt that you have in your pan will shift and your gold will fall off the bottom. Just something to recognize with riffles. It's also why you want to make sure that they're not clogged with clay, because clay will often clog up your riffles to the point where they become non-effective. Alright, we're down to the skinning of it. Let's wash it back. All of those things in the center of the screen are either shotgun pellets, bits of scrap tin, bits of scrap lead. We've got a little bit of iron in there, and all the black material you see is black sand. In my area, that is tin. And therefore, everything is pointing to the fact that we should see a little bit of gold. Probably not heaps, but a little bit. Yep, there we go. Only a couple pieces. But we are definitely in the right spot to be getting some decent gold, and possibly even a little nugget by the size of those bits. Well, I just said it. It always happens like this. You just turn the camera off. You're like, oh, I've done my little informational video. We're all good. I'll just keep working my spot, see how much gold I get. You know, it's not like a full work day. I told you the coarse gold here with that log indicated that there could be a little nugget here. And the reason for that is really simple. High velocity floodwater coming down the stream only drops out the heaviest things. So you're only going to get really big gold accumulating in an area like this because of how fast that water's running. So if all you're getting is big flakes, eventually there's going to be something like this running down the stream. That's a little gold nugget. And that is actually a trick that I should have mentioned earlier. If you want to find bigger pieces of gold, you want to find nuggets, you don't want to hunt where all of the flower gold is accumulating. You want to hunt in the faster water, like where I am now. Because the faster water is where these fall out. It takes a lot less of an energy drop in the water for a gold nugget to drop out than it does for the flower gold. So the water might have backed off maybe 2 or 3 meters a second when this fell out of suspension, whereas it very likely fell out maybe 10 or 15 meters a second for those to fall out. Anyway, found myself a nugget. This is going to be the perfect opportunity before I reveal the gold, just to mention, if you are interested in treasure hunting at all, gold prospecting, hit the subscribe button and the bell notification so you don't miss out on any of my future videos where we do educational stuff like this and grand adventures. And if you're interested in supporting the channel, go to theoldmoldy.com.au and pick yourself up some t-shirts and merch. Now I know that doesn't look terribly impressive, but this is what I have recovered from behind that log in the last 4 pans preceding this. You're going to see a lot of shotgun pellets. Just look at that, all those shotgun pellets. And actually a decent amount of gold for the amount of work that's been put in. Remember, 4 pans. Gold is currently over 3,500 Australian dollars an ounce, so every one of those specks you see is quite valuable. And for my region, they're quite large flakes. You can see them in comparison to the size of a regular shotgun pellet. That is not a bad take for just 4 pans. And I'm going to be willing to bet there's a whole bunch more gold in and around that log. So I'm going to keep working at it and see if I can't find some more before the sun goes down and I get all cold.